Cool.
So I'd like to introduce Evan Stone. He is an attorney and Python developer in Ann Arbor, and he currently works as an in-house developer at a law firm designing workflow automation. He's originally from Dallas, Texas, and he worked for FUNimation Entertainment, which is now part of Sony, serving as their legal counsel in charge of things like content protection and rights enforcement. And in addition to being a lawyer, he developed kind of an entire suite of checking for and logging infringing content. And so he's going to show us some examples of how he can use web scraping and browser control with BeautifulSoup and Selenium. So thanks for presenting today, Evan.
Yeah, you bet. I think this combination of tools is really fun for me. So. Okay, let me share my screen. I will jump right in. All right, can everybody see this?
Yeah, we can.
I did get some slides ready. Oh, and the Zoom menu is blocking the play button. Okay. So yeah, web scraping and browser control with BeautifulSoup and Selenium. If anybody has ever used either of these tools before, say so in the chat, because I'm just really curious. I rely on these a ton. I know in circles they're very popular, but I'm just quite curious as to who else has had any experience with them. So the purpose of this talk is to learn how to pull data from websites and store it in a format that better facilitates searching, sorting, analysis, etc. About me, Evan, as he said, I'm an attorney, an in-house developer at a small law firm. I do have a firm on the side. It has mostly wound down, but I still have a handful of active cases. It's an intellectual property firm focusing mostly on copyright and trademark issues. And so those take place in federal court, and I've tried cases all around Colorado, Illinois, Texas, primarily in Texas, but I've been sent all over the place for either for Funimation or for other private clients on the side. I'm the founder of a very, very tiny LLC. It's mostly just been me, called Aquapony Innovations. It still exists. I did tech projects on the side through that company. And yeah, that was kind of moonlighted as a tech guy while being a lawyer, because you've got to throw some fun stuff in if your main career is super boring. And legal counsel for Funimation Entertainment, that actually had some fun moments. Even though I was basically a copyright cop, managing a team of people doing the same thing, and we got a lot of hatred for what we did, taking people's cartoons down off the internet that they've been watching for free. They got pretty upset about that, but that was the job, and we're trying to protect artists and the creators. We want them to get paid, so that's what you got to do. I think the craziest part of the job was when they would send us to conventions in person, and we would have to give cease and desist letters to people selling counterfeit merchandise. That would get nasty. So, but we would always have backup from the people running the conventions, and we had to shut down a booth and kick people out of the con. It was always a big spectacle. Lots of people were trying to figure out what was going on and gawking. So yeah, my life as a copyright cop, and as a copyright cop was made much easier by Python and these tools that I'm about to show you today. So as far as the tools and the setup, Python is the core for everything that I'm about to show this evening. I've been using Python for several years now. I guess in the very, very beginning, I was working on VBA and then PHP and now Python. I don't have a background in computer science. I've never learned any of the real languages like C or Java, but I never really needed to, because my primary career was as an attorney, and this is the first time that my key role has been as a developer, and it's great. It's much less stressful than being a lawyer, and I love just sitting around and writing code all day. So Python is key. And the second component we really need for what is a database, because the whole point of scraping data off of websites is so you can hang on to it and do other stuff with it. You can analyze it in different ways and manipulate it and do some real data science with it if you've got it stored in a proper database. And the big project that I'm going to show at the end of the talk is a project involving scraping court dockets from my home county, Denton County, Texas. And we pulled a ton of information from those dockets and analyzed it in a way that you could not possibly have done just through the website itself, because it was a very rudimentary website. The search features are limited. And of course, there's no way to recombine things or connect things in ways that you could with an actual relational database system, and where you can store things in multiple tables and compare them in all different kinds of ways. So I think database is key for this. I use Postgres. We'll get into a little more detail about these tools in a second. BeautifulSoup is what we use to parse the data. BeautifulSoup is a work of art. The guy who created it is a really interesting fellow. He handed out a bunch of tiny comic books at one of the PyCon conventions I went to. It was like hand drawn by him, and sort of about his outlook on life and how we should be writing code to help each other out and help the world. And we need to be doing good with the code we write, at least some of the time. And I like his attitude. And if you look at the BeautifulSoup library, I think the whole thing is one big function, and it's mind-numbing to me to look at. Again, I don't come from a computer science background, so I can't wrap my head around the insides of that library at all, but I use it a ton and I love it. Then we've got Selenium, and that is for controlling your web browser. It's really handy, especially because so many sites that I deal with today, they prevent you from pulling down the data with other tools. Anybody that's familiar with the Linux, Unix environment, I'm sure you've heard of wget. And with Python, you've got the requests library, and those are just simple one-line commands to fetch the contents of a web page. And that's easy to automate as well. But if the website isn't having it, then the website isn't having it. And that's when something like Selenium comes in really handy, because then you can control an actual web browser and have the web browser visit the pages that you want, and you can pull the content down through the actual browser source directly without having to worry about the site fighting you. So I'll show an example of a site fighting this too. And then Django, that's a web framework for building web apps in Python. And I love it. I think at one point Django touted itself as the easiest, fastest way to create a web app in Python. They've changed some of their marketing some, but to me, that's been true. And I've played with things like Flask, and Django is the big batteries included one that I love. And it's the built-in tools in Django are outstanding. So here's a view of PyCharm. It's the IDE that I use for Python. That's my integrated development environment. The database connectivity in PyCharm is outstanding. The linter is great. That's what helps you with highlighting different parts of code and helping you format the code and showing you what errors are. PyCharm excels at that. It makes everything so much easier that at this point, it's really hard for me to write Python in anything other than PyCharm. I better get away from that slide because it actually shows the end game of where we are. Did somebody have a question, or is that just a random mic on? Anyone?
I had a question I put in chat.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you put it there. Let's see. BeautifulSoup and Selenium cool. Any legal issues with scraping? Was that your question? Yeah, you're Thomas. So usually you're not violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. You might be making some civil violation, breach of contract, or some implied agreement. By using this site, you have agreed to these terms. And if you start scraping, you could be in breach of that agreement. They could sue you for it civilly. 90% of the time, you're not going to face criminal liability unless you're doing something serious where you're on a site where you've got some private exclusive access and you're scraping data and then you're sharing that data with third parties or sharing it publicly. That's typically the big issue. The main project that I'm demoing today, the first little test project to see how BeautifulSoup works, and then the big project that I want to just kind of demo, both of those are public sites. One's a public university site, and then the other is a public county website. So we're not going to run into any legal issues with those, but yeah, be on the safe side. I don't hear about too many problems with people, too many legal issues with people scraping, and it's so much work to find out who was doing it, and depending on how they're doing it. But even subpoenaing an IP address for a residential IP is kind of a pain, and I've done this literally hundreds, if not thousands of times, because weren't infringers as well. And yeah, we were sending out subpoenas in bulk. I mean, to every little municipal ISP around the country, we would send 200, 300 subpoenas for a single case. So it's a huge pain, and you need a federal court order usually. So I think it's more about not whether you're violating the law, but the likelihood of someone actually going after you for it. So, but I still try to be courteous. When I scrape these public sites, if I'm doing something in bulk, I try to do it in the off hours, and sometimes I will put pauses. So it's not like a DDoS attack. I'm not doing anything async where I'm, 1,000 hits a second, nothing crazy like that. So I think if you stay courteous and you're not doing something crazy with the data, like sharing it in some way that the source of the data would be upset about, then you're usually going to be okay. So VS Code. Okay. All right. And so here's Postgres. This is just the open page of their website. They tout themselves as the most advanced open source relational database. I think it's true. I mean, I've worked with Oracle and Microsoft SQL Server, and I think you can do anything in Postgres that you can do in those. It's extremely powerful, it's extremely fast, and I love working in it. And these days, I won't really work with anything else for the projects that I do. And I love the fact that it's open source and free, like free beer. BeautifulSoup, again, like I said, the guy who created this, he's kind of quirky. And BeautifulSoup does come from Alice in Wonderland. You should check it out. It's fun and it's amazing. And like I said, it makes my head hurt looking at the source code. Selenium is for automating browsers. And yeah, speaking of legal issues right there, they're hinting, what you do with that power is entirely up to you. So I tell you one instance where I didn't care at all about the legal ramifications is when I was scraping pirate websites to report the content or find where the content was being sourced, because the pirates themselves aren't going to remove the content, but if you can scrape a whole website and find out where the source is, and that's some big CDN that's based in the United States and the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, then you can send them a takedown notice and they'll remove the content right from the source. So that's a lot of what we did with our big scraping projects for anti-piracy. And I've got to throw this note in because this snags some people. You need a little tool called the Gecko driver for Selenium to work, usually if you're driving Selenium through Python. And I have found that it's best, especially if you're using an IDE, it's best to stick the Gecko driver in the bin directory of the virtual environment that you create. And I will also highly recommend using a virtual environment whenever you can with your Python projects. I think it makes everything simpler and it's less muddled and crazy, because obviously PyPI is huge right now. I mean, there's so many libraries, and the more you can separate your stuff, I think the better. So Django, again, you can make web apps so quickly with Django. I love it. I use it for everything. And it's also an ORM, which is an object relational mapper, which means you can just use Django to interface with your database. The tables are basically reflected as models, and you have a very object-oriented way of interacting with those through Python. And so creating objects and little instances of those objects, those are basically, each instance is a row in a database. And the interface is just so straightforward. And people who don't know SQL or they hate SQL, Django lets you read and write and manipulate entries in a database 10 times easier than trying to do it with SQL. So highly recommended for folks that hate doing that. So, okay, let's get out of here and let's actually scrape some data. So there's a site that I found that I thought would be fun to play with. I got to figure out where to move that zoom bar. Okay, it's this right here. This is it's the full faculty directory for the University of Michigan Computer Science and Engineering program. So let's say we want to grab all of the faculty names and email addresses from this list. We want to do it cleanly, and then we want to store all this data in a database. So the first issue is getting the source content out. I mentioned wget and requests. Anybody wants to chime in the chat if they've ever used either of those. I found right off the bat with requests, this site didn't like what I was doing. I'll go ahead and tell me if this is big enough for everyone to see. I'll try to. Can everybody see the text there?
Yeah, looks good. Yep.
Okay.
Well, will the code you do tonight be available for download?
Yes. I will share my repo. My GitHub repo for this project is public, so everything you're looking at in here will be up. I'll make a couple of tweaks for the live demo, and I'll try to do a push as soon as the talk is over, so it stays current. And I do have a requirements file in there. There's a lot of stuff that you're not going to need everything for this kind of project. I mean, you see this list of libraries that I have for this project has grown sort of huge. I don't think you're going to need everything just for this. You know, if you're not using a database backend, there's pieces you won't need. And there's one other app that I have in this project. It's a Minecraft chat bot where you can chat by SMS message to players on a Minecraft server. So some of these utilities are just for that. But there is a requirements file in the repo. So, all right. So if we're going to import requests, and we're just going to try to request get this U of M site here. I spelled requests wrong. That's going to happen in live demos. Okay, we got a 403 response. Who wants a cookie by telling us what a 403 means? Even if it's got to be you, Dan, somebody throw it out there. It means forbidden. So they're not giving us anything. For whatever reason, this U of M page doesn't want somebody pulling down from it with requests. It might be because the way requests is going to identify itself as a bot rather than a browser, and they might be looking for real browsers only. Who knows exactly what it is, but it doesn't seem to like that. I tried getting this with wget, and that appeared to work, and I've also tried simply going into source view and copying and pasting the data, but I had some trouble with that. And so I think sometimes when you're doing that, you're going to get some weird characters. Not everything is going to paste cleanly, and that's usually not the way to go. So if there's any other way to go about it, I recommend that. So for this example, we're going to pull it down with Selenium. So it's going to be a quick jump into Selenium, and then we'll get back into the details of Selenium later. Right now, I'm only going to open Selenium to grab the source code of this page so we can start doing some real stuff with the page. So I will grab, these should be enough. And then we're going to create a little zombie version of Firefox here with the Selenium WebDriver. And there it is. There's our zombie Firefox. Now you can see how weird the address bar is? It's all hashed out and it's got a little robot in it. That means this is not a normal browser. This is a fresh instance with no cache, no history, no nothing, not even any bookmarks. It's a completely fresh Firefox session, and it is being controlled from Python right now. I can open it, close it, and go to websites, whatever I want. So I'm just going to paste in this faculty page, and then I'm going to ask this to give us the page source. And there it is. It just spit out all the page source from that page. It's the same thing that we were looking at here, except it's a little version of it. All right, now we've got the source. I'll store that somewhere. We're just going to call it source. Okay, so we've stored that source. And all right, let me move some of these windows away. You can pull it up here too. PyCharm is great about making all your variables available over on the side. So there it is. Now, if we're looking at the page itself, well, let's look at it through our zombie browser. We need to figure out how to identify the pieces of data that we want. So we've got faculty name. We said we wanted to get the name and we wanted to get the email address. So we need to find out how to identify these fields of data that we're after. And to do that, we'll just jump into developer mode and open the inspector. I do all this with shortcuts. For anybody who's not familiar, let me show you what the menu commands are. You can go to tools, browser tools, web developer tools, and then you can click on this little inspector icon left of the inspector tab. And once that's active, you can start cursoring over the page and you can see the basic tag information for whatever element you cursor over. So we're going to start with the name, and I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And we can see that it is an H4 tag, and it is part of a bigger element called person copy. And I don't think that's copy as in duplicate. I think that's copy as in copy that you write. So there it is. There's a class called person copy with an H4 in it. And it looks like, well, you can tell just visually, that's header 4. There's nothing else that big within this element. So if we were going to pull us just by the tag, because BeautifulSoup will let you pull by tags and any attribute within a tag, and even the text that's displayed. Those are usually the 3 key ways that you're going to pull data with BeautifulSoup is by looking at either the tag or a combination of tag and an attribute within that tag or the text. So for this, I think it's going to be easiest to pull the H4 tag. So we'll go ahead and we'll turn this source into what's called soup. And that is all the parsing actually happens in this step right here. So there's our source. We're going to ensure that it's using an HTML parser because BeautifulSoup can actually use a variety of parsers. So that right there created the soup, and it's probably just going to look. What was that?
Oh, sorry.
So you've got all the elements broken down in an easily accessible way with using the methods of BeautifulSoup. So if we want to find this first one, let's see. It's a div tag with a class of EECS person copy. So we've created our soup object, and we're going to use the find method on that soup object, and we're going to search for a div tag. And we want to use, now you can pass an attributes dictionary and you can name whatever attribute you want, but a handful of attributes are so commonly used, like class, that BeautifulSoup will let you use that individually. Class, of course, is also a protected word in Python, so there could be a conflict there, and BeautifulSoup's resolution to that is to just add an underscore after the word class. So it looks really weird, but that's to get past the issue of it being a protected class. Now, so I think we had EECS person copy. Nope, nothing came back. Exactly. EECS underscore person underscore copy, and it was a div tag. And does anybody see what went wrong?
It's a typo.
It's a typo. There, okay, it worked that time. It grabbed the very first one, and you can see it's just that first one. It's that guy we were dealing with, Stephen Abney, and all the info is within here. But what we first want is just this H4. Well, the cool thing is, if we want to grab the, let's say, we'll just call it it's the wrapper object was the first thing that we found. So we'll just make a wrapper variable and we'll store that there. And you'll see that wrapper is yet another BeautifulSoup object. It's a tag object. So if we want to run BeautifulSoup methods on that, we can keep running them on that just as we ran it on the entire soup itself. So we do wrapper find H4, and we don't need to put anything else in there. We don't have to do other attributes like we did previously because it's the only H4 tag in that whole block. We checked it out and that's it. There's just one H4 tag. So we'll run that, and there you there. H4 Abney Stephen. Now, usually you don't want to look at the tag itself. So you've got another method called getText. And when you run that, you just get the text that's within that tag. So from here, if we want to get the entire list, we're going to use, instead of find, we're going to use find all. And I think, yeah, since the clock's moving pretty fast, I'll try to speed this up. And let's say we want to do soup.findAll, and it was a div with class of EECS person copy. We want to find all of those, let's say, and we'll do for wrapper in find all. We're going to print that wrapper, and we're going to find just the H4. And we also want to throw in the getText because we don't care about all the other junk. And now this should give us a list of all the faculty. And there it is. We just went through that website and grabbed only the faculty names, and it spit them out right there in our console. So let's say we want to grab the email address. We'll turn our inspector on again, and we'll see how that's identified. Well, this one, it's an anchor tag for hypertext anchor, and it's got a class of person email. I love sites like this where the classes are very logical. So that's great. So for this, to add it in here, tell you what, to clean this up, I'm going to put this in an F string. Everybody knows about F strings, right? We'll split it up there. And we're going to do
an F string is.
Okay, an F string. It's Python came out with these, I think, in I don't know 3.5 or 3.6. It's a way of formatting variables in a string. Basically, just any string with either double quotes or single quotes. You put the letter F in front of it, and then if you've got anything within braces, it will treat that as Python. So you can have functions within it. You can have variables. And it will reduce whatever that is to a string if it's capable of being reduced to a plain text string, and it will spit it out that way. So it makes formatting really easy when you're doing stuff like this. So we're going to find, and it was an anchor tag. So we were doing anchor on this one, and the class was, what was it? Person email, I think. Person email. So this should go through all of these big wrapper objects here, and it should give us the H4, and it should give us the anchor with class of person email. It should print out just the text. Oh, well, this one's not going to print it out because I didn't add that. So .getText. Hey, and there it is. So now we've got all their names and all their email addresses. And if you want to put something in there as a different delimiter, I mean, I just used the 2 hyphens. you could put a semicolon in there, or a, well, not a comma, because let's just say you wanted to use a semicolon or a pipe or something. So you could then just copy and paste this into Excel, split it up in 2 columns, and there you've got it. I'm going to check the chat real quick just to see if there are any other questions or comments. Yes, heart F strings. Okay. Any questions? Yeah, I'll go ahead and take a break for questions right now if anyone has any. Nope. Voice or text, either way, it's fine with me. Okay. So close that chat again. All right. Now let's go for something else. Let's try to get phone numbers. Okay. Well, it's a span tag, and the class is person copy section. Anybody see anything here that might be problematic?
Quotes and
Looks the same as our office address.
Exactly. Yeah. So there is no real way of distinguishing the phone number or the office address by these classes. So when you run into a situation like that, you're going to have to find some new criteria to look for. I think the most obvious criteria in this instance is looking for the word phone. And that's when the text search comes in handy. So let me see, did I grab everything in here? Yep, already, okay. So we've got regular expressions imported. For anybody who's not familiar with regular expressions, I highly, highly, highly recommend learning it. I learned regular expressions very late in the game, and it was a game changer for me when I finally did. The implementation of regular expressions for what we're doing is super, super simple. It's basically just a way to do a wildcard search in here. So what we're gonna do is let's take our very first wrapper we had. Let's see if he even has a phone number. Okay, he does. This is good. All right, so wrapper, and we're gonna look for, what was it, a span tag? Yeah, so that was a span tag. So we'll make sure we're looking for span tags. And then for the text, we could do a couple things. We could just use the word phone, since this one looks like it's gonna be exact. Let's see if it gets it. Oh, well, no, of course it didn't, because there's more text in there than just the word phone. All right, so in that case, we're going to use a regular expression, and you're going to give it a pre-compiled regular expression object, and it's going to be phone. I'm going to throw in a flag here to ignore case. So all we've got to type is phone. Now let's see if it gets it. It still didn't get it. Okay. Why would that be? Ignore case, compile, phone. All right, I'm gonna have to peek at my notes. Yeah, that's exactly the way it was before.
Need uppercase phone?
Not with the ignore case flag in
Oh.
there.
Well, it doesn't equal, does it? Don't you want contains?
No. Text equals RE compiled. Did I do find? Yep.
Is there a phone number in that wrapper right there?
Nope. There's not. Oh, you know why? The wrapper updated because we were iterating through the entire list. So the wrapper got the very first one. All right, let's revise this so we get back to our first guy. Find, what was it, a div? Tell you what, let's just go through our handy dandy PyCharm history. All right.
Does PyCharm do up arrow previous command also?
Yeah, you can just scroll through them like that. But I love the list, because the great part about this, your history list, is you can select multiple things and it spits them out. And yeah, I love being able to cherry pick from that. Okay, so Hey, did we do it or not? Soup find div. There we go. Now we got Stephen Abney back. Perfect. All right. And there's his phone number. So yeah, I guess we scroll all the way down to that Z. Okay, no phone number here. So that, yeah, that is exactly why that happened. We were searching for something that did not exist. So it worked. It's just, that was just error. And again, if you only want the text, you just throw in the get text method. And there it is. Now, are there any questions at this point?
I have one question, Evan.
Sure.
Yeah, the same way, can we find out the dynamically changing elements as well?
One more time?
The same way, can we figure it out, identify the dynamically changing elements as well?
To figure out if there's a dynamic change in one element of the page?
Yeah, the thing is that if ID is time to time, it is getting changed.
Sure. I mean, using Selenium, you could continue refreshing that page, or checking the page once each day, and then compare it to what you had stored previously, and it will tell you if anything had changed. Yeah, that's easy to do. If you're storing those variables in your database and you know the same record that you're looking for, and then just do a new scrape and see if there's a change. I will also note there's a very, very, very handy Firefox plugin called Check for Change, and it will even let you highlight a piece of a page, and you can set how often you want the page to refresh, and the page will refresh that often, and it will check for that element that you highlighted, and then it will play a snippet of David Bowie's changes, and then you know that there's a change in that page. So yeah, but it could be done with Selenium and BeautifulSoup as well, for sure. All right. So since there are no questions on that, I'm going to go ahead and run. This is basically the compilation of what we've done. There's a couple extra pieces that are happening in here. One, I'm creating a blank list. And then after printing all of these results out, I am also appending that list with a list of the elements that were found. And there's one other thing I've thrown in here, which is this initial search for a specific element, like for phone in particular. Sometimes, as we saw with our last person in the alphabet there was no phone number found. So it's not going to attempt to get text when there is no text, because a none object has been returned. So I've thrown in a little, if this search actually exists, then give us the data. If it doesn't exist, then mark it as an unlisted number. But that's the exact search that we use for the name. That's the exact search we use for the email. Same search we use for phone, and we're just tweaking it a little bit for the phone search before anything gets appended, because we might get nothing. So to run, and then at the very, very end here, I'm just dumping it into a pandas data frame for easy visualization. So let's run all this together and see what happens. Uh-oh. Pandas. Okay. One more time. So there we go. It spit everybody out, including the phone numbers and the unlisted phone numbers you can see down there at the bottom. Or I mean on the right column. But even better, let's look at it in a pandas data frame. Definitely say something in the chat if you are a fan or user of pandas, because I use it and I love it, and I know very, 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 very little about it. But it's super handy. So here's something I just want to point out. Well, or rather, if someone else would like to point this out, do you see anything interesting about the phone number column?
You removed phone colon.
Oh, I did. Sure. Yeah. In naming the columns, I just typed those manually. I just typed in name, email, and phone. But looking at the actual contents, the data that was scraped.
Yeah,
What
you
was that?
took out the word phone and the colon.
I did,
Well,
and that's
the phone
that's in
text,
here
you're
with, I
going
just
7
sliced it.
colon.
What was that?
The phone text, you're going 7 colon, so you also get the word unlisted.
Yes, so I did
Because otherwise
slice
it
off.
would cut off.
I did slice off the word phone, colon, and the space after it. But
Some
what
of
about
them
the
have
data that you see here?
parentheses and some don't.
Yeah.
Formatting.
Exactly. Yeah. So this, of course, drives me totally crazy when people are allowed to input data so non-uniformly like this. Then it really, it makes whatever analytics you're going to run on it later more cumbersome. But that is what it is. So. Okay, so those are the basics of using BeautifulSoup to find elements on a page, either by tag or a combination of tag and attribute or tag and text. And you could do far more with it than that, but those are the key concepts of BeautifulSoup in a nutshell. Now, I want to jump into some browser automation because that's pretty cool too. And we will jump over to this Denton Court website, my favorite. Okay. So Denton County Courts, all right. My podunk little home. So here we've got a drop down and we've got links that need to be clicked. This is an old site written in ASP, and there actually is something to this. There's a combination of pulling something from a drop down and clicking a link. Like if I click this link, it's going to take me to a search page. And if this was selected from the drop down, when I click this link, it's going to restrict the searches only to that court. And I don't think the site's been updated in 10 years, but let's go ahead and take a look at what the contents of this page look like, because not everything is as clean and pretty as what we saw on the other site, on the U of M site. Actually, let me do a different search because that was too small. We're going to look at all JP courts. No, we're going to do all JP and county courts. Okay, we're going to search by attorney. We'll put my name in. Okay, so here's a list of cases that I've been an attorney on in Denton County for the JP and county courts at law. And we're going to click on a case. And let's see what these elements look like. Okay, we've got bold tags. Okay, table header label. We've got an actual class there for table header label. That's nice. What about down here? Nope. Table data, table data, table data, table data, SS table header. That's something. Table data. So table data again. So this one, as you can see, was a real challenge. It was quite a pain in the butt because there aren't a lot of specific classes for all of these distinct different elements of the page. There's nothing over here that's separating address from phone number. It's just another piece of table data. And when you get into a situation like that, it's really a matter of iterating over rows and cells and counting out which one is likely to be in this place or that place. So the code to parse a page like this is kind of gross. And I'll give you a peek at it right now. Let's see here. All right. Parse case. So some of the parsing I do through SQL, because again, for a project like this, I'm using Selenium to go to each of these individual pages. Every individual case you see in this list is visited, and then this page source is saved to the database, and then that source is parsed later. So in the code, you've got things like looking for table headers with text that says charges to find out what the person is charged with. And then you've got a bunch of nested iterations over. One of the tags was a PIR. Oh no, that was an ID. And so the ID attribute of the tag was capital P, capital I, R. So we're looking for that. And then just a lot of nested iteration, and it's really gross. And I wanted to show that because a lot of sites you're going to deal with aren't going to be as clean as what we had on the U of M site. And it's just a lot of trial and error and counting things out and doing a bunch of iteration over time. So that's just, I don't want to delve any more into the parsing of that because we're running out of time. I want to get into some browser automation while we can. So browser automation with Selenium. All right. You can do so many things with your browser and Selenium. Let me try to move this window to the side here and get our little zombie window over here. All right. And we'll go to the search menu. Let's get rid of our developer mode. Okay. Maybe we'll shrink this down. All right. Can everybody see these variables okay?
Yep.
Okay. So let's say we want to go to this drop down. So it's a select tag and it has a class, or rather it's got an ID of SB, what was it? SBX control ID 2. So using Selenium, you've got a method called find element by ID, and that's what we're doing. And we're passing SBX control ID 2 to it. And then we're using the method select by visible text, which just goes by the visible text of all the choices in the dropdown. And you can see right now it's set to all JP and county courts. Well, I've got some variables already stored in the config file of my database right here. So the court choice list, we want all JP courts. That's already saved. I'm going to load that up right here. Okay, so those are loaded. So now if I execute this, we should see all JP and change to all JP courts. Let's see if it works. Actually, hold on. Since we're only dealing with one item and this is designed to iterate through a list of items, we're going to have to just signify we want the first element. All right. So everybody ready for it to change? Boom. Did you see the change? Mm-hmm. So I actually changed the choice in the drop-down list directly from Python just by executing that. Now, it's going to be the same thing if we, let's see, we'll do case type. We need to pull one from the list. Case type list. Okay. Go to, now it's going to click on that element on the page. Click, it just clicked it. And then we're going to click on the date filed radio button. So see right now we're on the party button and we want to change this to date filed. So I go over here and I execute that line and it just changed the radio button for us. Then we want to send in, we're just going to do a simple send keys. And again, Selenium is just using find element by ID, and we can find out what the ID is just in our developer console. And when we run this, it should input whatever the next date is in my database to pick up where we left off. And I should have turned off my notifications. Sorry. Okay. So, oh, cycle date not defined. Why did it not do that? Cycle date equals start date. There we go. So that enters the date for us. And then it's going to put in the end date. And then you can have it click the search button. So there you go. All those things that the browser just did were driven directly from Python. Now, what gets fun is when you actually want to set it off on its own and go pull this stuff up for you. There's probably one variable I didn't enter yet, but let's see what happens. It'll tell us and we can fix it if we need to. There we go. So as you can see, it's entering new search ranges. It's pulling a range of, I think, 3 days at a time because the results can only show 400 per retrieval. And this is what pulls it. So pretty cool. That's your basic browser control with Selenium when you're looping it. Now with this particular project, the way it works is each individual case in one result set is visited. And when it's visited, the source is downloaded from that page. So let me comment that out and I'll show you what the whole thing looks like. We'll just do num runs equals 1. So now it's going to a single index list and it's pulling each individual page and it is saving the source of that page as it visits that page. It dumps that into a big database. And then afterwards, we parse the data out of the database with that very gnarly code that I showed you a minute ago. And that is, that's the long and the short of it. And through this, well, I mean, that's just going to keep running. So we'll let it run. I was able to put together some information like this. This is actual data that I derived from this scraping project about eviction cases tried in Denton County. And I was trying to determine if there was bias among certain judges or not. And Joe Holland, that guy, as you can see, almost every case in his court, over 90% of the eviction cases in his court went in favor of the landlord. And that was a bias that I had suspected, but now I have concrete data to back it up. So that's the end result of what this project was. I can see it's 8 o'clock now, so I should shut up and take any questions if anybody has them. I see one in the chat. Which browser should you use? I like Firefox for all of this testing, and if you're running anything locally from your machine, I think that Firefox is outstanding. If you are going to use, and yes, you can extract pictures. If you're going to run something on a VPS and you don't have a GUI, then I recommend using Chromium. It's the open source browser that is it's the source for Chrome and Edge and one other big one. But Chromium is awesome, and you can actually run Chromium in something called headless mode. So that's where you can run it just on a server where you don't have any, you don't need to see anything at all, but you're still, you still need a browser to be interacting with the site because the site is going to refuse to interact with anything other than what it thinks is a real browser. And Chromium is a real browser, even if it's running in headless mode. So for this site, I think it's, I have my docket eater, got delay, and we'll just do a couple of runs. So in a second, you're going to see everything you were seeing over here where it's downloading case. I'm pointing, nobody can see my finger pointing, but whatever, I'm down here, it's showing cases being downloaded in the live window. Well, this is the same thing, but this is happening on a little Linux VPS that I rent. And this is all being managed through Celery, which is a task manager that works really well with Django and Python. So yeah, there's no GUI here, and it's just, you're just in the terminal, and it's using Chromium instead of Firefox to go to that same site and click on the drop downs and click on the links and fill in the dates in those fields and retrieve the data.
Any other questions for Evan, anyone?
Oh, link for code, right. What about JavaScript?
Yes.
I mean, it will pull the JavaScript, and you can also execute JavaScript commands. yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff you can do with Java in there. I think, let's see if it's in, I don't know if it's in this project, but let me see if I've got any. Oops. No, it's in another one that I don't think I have on this machine, but yeah, you can execute JavaScript through the browser control, which is crazy. And there's a lot of just DOM commands that you can also run. And there's, you know, waiting for element to load and all kinds of, you got to get kind of fancy with some sites that are really, you know, the sites where you have maybe an expanding element and you click the plus next to the element and then the element expands and the data within that doesn't actually load until the element has expanded. So you're sending clicks or you're sending JavaScript commands to make that happen to get the additional data. And then you're sending Selenium waits to wait for that part to load before you then pull it so you can later parse it. And yeah, it gets wild. Let me pass that GitHub link.
Thank you, Ivan.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
And I have a question. Is possible there's a tool like this could record your action become a script like a VBA in Excel? You could record.
You're sorry, how was I recalling my commands that I was entering here in the console?
I mean, in the reverse direction, you do the action on the browser, then record it as an action into a Python script, or
Oh, okay, yes. So there is something called the Selenium IDE, and there it is. Yeah, you can record a test in a new project. I haven't used this in a long time, but what it does is, sure, should we go there? No, I want to go to the University of Michigan one. Where is that? All right. And then, so it's recording right now. So if I'm going to click on the letter H or click on courtesy faculty, and then I think I've got to go up here to stop the recording. Yeah, it will show you what you executed, and you can get it to, I think you can get it to spit that out in your choice of languages. You can,
it's great.
Yeah. So this really helps to get the Python that you want. There's some way to export it in your choice of code, but yeah, the Selenium IDE browser plugin for Firefox, very, very, very handy.
It's almost like Postman for web scraping.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one.
Postman's used to do API calls. I mean, literally the layout on this is almost the exact same.
Okay. Yeah, I swear there is just a simple, like, it's like a right click or something where you can have it give you the spit back the code in the way you want. But yeah, check that out and play with it for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Evan?